Haynes and the District 9 City Councilor representing Alston Brighton. Today is Thursday, June 13th, and we are here with our folks from the Treasury Department regarding Docket 0804, message and order authorizing the Collector Treasurer for the City of Boston to enter into a compensation balance agreement with Citizens Bank pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F, for the provision of banking services as more fully described in the attached form. I'd like to remind you this is a public hearing, broadcast and recorded on RCN 82, Comcast Channel 8, Verizon 1964, and streamed at online. I'd like to ask folks to silence their cell phones and electronic devices. If anybody wishes to testify publicly, there is a sign-in sheet to my left by the door. We ask that you state your name, any affiliation, your residence, and please check the box yes if you do wish to testify. I'd also like to welcome my friends and colleagues to my left in order of their arrival. My friend from South Boston, City Councilor I was going to say Ray, Ed Flynn, and to my right, my friend from Dorchester, at-large City Councilor Anissa Sabi-George. And with that, I will turn it over to Drew.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, councilors. I'm Drew Smith. I am head of Treasury for the City of Boston, also Senior Deputy Treasurer. I have Rich DiPiano with me, who's the Second Assistant Collector Treasurer for the city, and I also have some colleagues from Bank IQ, firm that helps us with our reporting requirements. As mandated by statute, every 3 years the city is required to reprocure its banking services contracts, and this requested hearing is the endpoint of that triennial process, with council and mayoral approval required before the new contract can be executed and taken force. The only contract the city currently has in place is the one with Citizens. That's the bank that currently provides all of the city's operational banking services. This contract expires at the end of this fiscal year, and the new contract would go into effect, the one you have before you, on July 1 for an ensuing 3-year period. I'd first like to give you an overview of our procurement process and then provide a bit of detail on the results of that process. Late in calendar 2018, the city made public its RFP for banking services and kicked off that process with a bidders conference in which all potential bidders were encouraged to attend. This conference is held for the purpose of giving potential bidders an overview of the procurement process as it is expected to unfold, to provide detail on any items of note, particularly those items that may have changed since the previous procurement, and to answer any questions any bidder might have. I am pleased to note that we received a record number of bidders at the conference, which seemed to be an indication of strong interest in this particular procurement. This indication of interest was further confirmed in the city's receipt of 9 proposals. After disqualification of one of the proposals for technical reasons, the evaluation team set about to score the remaining proposals against 6 categories. 1, scope of services. 2, management capability. 3, quality control. 4, disaster business recovery. 5, references. And 6, but certainly not least, the cost. Based on that evaluation, we found 3 firms to be grouped in a top range with the remaining firms grouped at a lower range. These 3 firms represented those which we would be comfortable giving the contracts to. After opening the cost proposals and comparing those against the technical scores, it was determined that Citizens Bank would be the winner of the next contract. Citizens' fee schedule, while already low, came in even slightly better than the current cost structure in force. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about the procurement in just a bit. As far as the document itself, the contract before you is very similar to contracts you've seen in years past. The primary change, however, is the way the earnings credit rate is calculated. With compensating balance agreements, rather than appropriating and then paying hard dollars for banking services, which can be notoriously difficult to estimate, the city leaves amounts on deposit in those accounts. While we do not earn interest on those amounts, we do earn credits that are essentially used to pay for the fees. In prior years, a stable ECR, earnings credit rate, was agreed to at the outset of the contract and was left fixed over the life of the contract, regardless of what the market has done. As a part of this contract, however, the city had dictated that the ECR would be a floating rate pegged against the 13-week T-bill, ensuring that at all times the city is, at the very least, receiving a market rate on its deposits rather than setting that rate at the outset and hoping the market moves in our favor. The additional benefit of this structure is that all responses were put on a level playing field with only one set of numbers to bid rather than two, so that we might better be able to drive down cost of actual service rather than also focusing on the ECR. As far as total expected annual cost of the contract, it is, as I had mentioned, difficult to say, but we estimate it to be at $2 million annually currently. It's important to note, however, that all but $300,000 of that is made up of credit card merchant charges for parking meters and the mobile app, which are simply passed through by the bank rather than actually retained. Additionally, we expect some of those fees to go away over the course of this year, as additional merchant charges will be passed along rather than absorbed by the city. It is important to note that the amounts required to be held in these compensating balance accounts will be significantly less over the next 3 years than in years past, due to changes that have been recently made to the way the city processes credit card transactions. The result will be significantly more assets held in interest-bearing deposit accounts, generating significantly more in investment earnings for city operations. In closing, I will say that while the city has enjoyed a fairly lengthy, positive working relationship with citizens, as still a newish member of the City Hall team, I can attest to the fact that their response to this RFP was a very well put together one that demonstrated that they were not only the bank best positioned to continue providing the contemplated services, but also the one able to do it at the lowest cost. This is coupled with the bank's deep involvement in the city, as is further illustrated in the city's linked deposit report that Bank IQ puts together, which we have indication, by the way, may be one of the best of its kind in the country. And that report indicates an outstanding rating in that their delivery systems are available to all and to individuals of all geographies and income levels. That a substantial majority of the dollar volume of the bank's investment transactions was focused on affordable housing, and excellent lending activity, which indicated good distribution of mortgage loans to low and moderate income geographies and borrowers, as well as good small business lending. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, and we've been joined by my friend from Jamaica Plain, Councilor Matt O'Malley, as well. You mentioned how the bid came in a little lower than the current contract. Did I hear that correct?
That's correct. The cost structure is just a little bit better. To be honest, it was already pretty low, so it was tough to go much lower.
Right.
But we did see slightly more favorable terms.
And so you're estimating about $2 million that the contract costs to administer.
$2 million altogether, and a big portion of that, as I'd mentioned, is
credit card.
The credit card fees that are really just passed along. So those come in to us. They're not actually charged by the bank. They're charged by the merchants. We use that ECR earning to pay those off. And then the other set of fees, the $300,000, is truly citizens banking charges to us. So the cost of transfers and payments out and things like that.
Right. And what are the services that they provide besides payroll?
Sure.
Right. They are our payroll vendor.
Well, they are, yes. Well, they manage the payroll account. They manage all accounts.
Right.
So, of course, we run payroll operations through city internal systems, but as far as the amounts actually going out, those are coming from citizens' accounts. Mm-hmm. And if you're curious about the other types of accounts and the other types of services they offer, I'm going to turn it over to Rich DiPiano, who's been doing this for a number of years now, and he could detail a few of those.
Thank you. In addition to the payroll services, they also provide services with respect to our direct deposit accounts. Mm-hmm. They provide the functionality to ACH those payments to employees, mm-hmm. as well as to the city's vendors, mm-hmm. that do business with the city, along with our retirees. Mm-hmm. They also provide DDA accounts, which are checking accounts, so that we can issue checks at a smaller level, as well as receive funds. Mm-hmm. They provide wire services. They provide reporting services for ACH credits. They provide bank reconciliation reports for us as well, mm-hmm. for all of our accounts.
Great, gotcha. And in our internal auditing committee, is that part of their audit as well? What they look at, the payroll function and the services from citizens?
It's part of the city's process in which it processes payroll.
Yeah.
Once that's been audited internally, then it's sent to citizens to carry forward.
Okay. And how much money do you think is held in the payroll account at any one time? And obviously, it's coming in and going, and how does that kind of work?
So with respect to the direct deposit account, it's maybe at most $20,000, and that's specifically because of rejects. Maybe a bank account might have been closed, or maybe the routing number for that bank was incorrectly transposed of a number, and it kicks back. And then we would do the research and then reissue the check to the employee or to the customer. The paper checks payroll, it usually runs about maybe $1 million
Okay.
of uncashed checks.
Right, okay. And can you reveal the three contenders? The Citizens was obviously one.
Sure.
Who were the other two?
Happy to. So it was Bank of America and Santander.
Okay, so two other multinational banks, right?
Yes. And if you like, I can list out the other banks that actually
Oh, yeah,
did
yeah,
respond
just out of
as well.
curiosity.
So we had Bank of America, Century Bank, Citizens, J.P. Morgan, People's United Bank, TD, Webster Bank, Santander, and Passport, which is not necessarily a traditional bank, but more of a service provider, and they just wanted a piece of the business rather than the entire contract.
Correct. And lastly, before I recognize my colleagues, Community Reinvestment Act, they are subjected to some kind of scoring?
They are.
Or, right, and how do they measure up to some of the other applicants, I guess, and are we holding them accountable, I guess?
We are. So we do, that's actually part of the service that Bank IQ helps provide to us. That information is found in the linked deposit banking report. Citizens receives a satisfactory CRA rating. That data is generally about 2 years old. But within that satisfactory rating, you have it split between a service test, you have it an investment test, and then a lending test. And as a part of that, they either generally receive high outstanding or outstanding marks on that.
Okay.
So that is something we look at.
Great. And that's kind of analyzed on a basis of giving loans or providing loans to low incomes, different zip codes maybe?
A number of different things. So we actually analyze it on it's the Boston-Suffolk track, I believe it's called, but it includes Quincy and some of Greater Boston. And so it's analyzing that data in particular.
Right.
And if you'd like more detail on that, I can certainly get
Okay.
our Bank IQ folks up. But that's really what they're looking at, and they're looking at not just lending activities, making sure that you have enough branches in areas that actually really need the service, but they're also looking at community engagement.
Right.
And seeing what they're doing in the community.
Right.
That's something we look at. We're not able to deposit with banks that don't have a satisfactory CRA rating.
Right.
So that's something that we always look at.
Great. Great. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Ciombo, and thank you to Drew and to Rich. I know you highlighted, Drew, the criteria you use to select the winning applicant, but is actually one of the criteria, is it the community engagement aspect? If so, what are you looking for there?
We did work that in. Every bank's community involvement is different. Some banks have heavier community involvement because they have larger assets and they have the ability to do a little bit more. Some banks that may not have as significant assets are still doing a lot with volunteer hours. It's a question that we ask of all the banks. It's a question that we get responses from, and we look at that as a part of the scoring process, and that would be looped into the overall final score.
And what does Citizens Bank bring to the table as it relates to investing in the neighborhoods, especially investing in the neighborhoods that desperately need it?
Joanna, is that something that would actually be caught specifically in the report? Because I'd love to point you to something specifically that you can look at if that's the case. Citizens, part of their involvement in the community comes from being a significant bank headquartered close by. So headquartered in Rhode Island with significant assets in Boston, significant city assets. And so you see them everywhere. And they are involved with a lot of different community groups and volunteer efforts. But I don't have specifics that I'd be able to really give you right now, and I don't want to just throw something out there and not be certain of it.
Now, would you have looked at what Citizens Outreach is to, say, first-time home buyers or low-income residents looking to buy their first home, would that be part of the criteria?
Let me actually just, if you can give me just a moment, I can look at the RFP and
Okay.
see exactly how we worded that.
Or Drew, if you want to check and get back to me at another time.
If I could, that would be great.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Okay.
As I had mentioned, those are the types of things that we generally see in the linked deposit banking report that we're always looking at.
Okay.
When we go out to, it's actually a good question, because when we go out to a number of these banks, if we're ever incepting a new deposit relationship, our practice is to go out to one of the local branches, speak with the local employees there, speak with senior management of the bank, and a lot of those questions revolve around exactly what they're doing in the community. It's no different than with citizens. We always like to keep a, kind of finger on the pulse of what they're doing. So I can get you more specifics on that.
Oh, that'd be great. And then my final question is, what type of plan do you have as it relates to security in terms of fraud, abuse, people trying to manipulate the system from the outside, taking advantage of the technology to enter your computer system? What type of IT assistance do you have?
So I'm not going to be able to give you a great answer on that, because most of that is, because we sit within the city network, most of that is handled with DoIT.
Okay.
It's a conversation that we have a lot of, because it's something that a lot of folks think about right now with what we've seen with Atlanta and certain other cities. A lot of our security also is provided by citizens as well, because they have their own systems, and that's actually where the money sits. But as far as our kind of our own financial systems within the city, to make sure that, as you said, nobody kind of goes in, and there's no way they could enter the accounts, but they could conceivably go in and try to manipulate data. That's something we're always on the lookout for. But I wouldn't be able to give you a great answer. I'm not a tech guy, unfortunately, and so that's more of a question. I'd be happy to get answers for you from DoIT, but I'd have to consult with them.
No, thank you. And my final question, I know Councilor Asabi George has worked on this issue before, but what type of outreach do you have working closely with the elderly or other residents to make sure that their accounts may not be manipulated also? Is that more of an IT question, or?
When you say their accounts, Counselor, do you mean like retirement?
Yeah, any type of an account, maybe someone, a senior citizen might have. I'm always concerned about our senior citizens, someone trying to take advantage of them through maybe getting their password,
Sure.
getting their account number, exploiting them in some certain way, a sophisticated way even. But what are we doing in terms of outreach to our elderly to make sure that this type of fraud doesn't occur?
So Treasury is at any given time developing a number of different new initiatives, and we've come and talked to you about a couple of those. I think that there is a really big opportunity for the City of Boston, or for the Treasury Department specifically, to engage in financial education and kind of be a watch of things like that. I think there may be other city departments that are probably a little bit more involved in that than Treasury is currently, in just kind of taking advantage of folks generally. But from a financial perspective, Treasury is looking for all sorts of different ways to engage with the community to make sure that anything money related, we're able to help provide assistance on. So we're not doing anything, we don't have any formal program rolled out yet, but I think there may be other city departments that might.
Yeah, I'd like to get some more information on that program, if I may. And I just want to make sure that that program, that we're also reaching out to our elderly and in languages other than English as well, to our
Absolutely.
non-English speaking residents.
I'll get you information on that.
All right. Thank you, Drew, and thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for being here, and I appreciate that education, because I don't think I've participated in the hearing where we've had this
3 years
topic
ago,
before
yeah.
us. So I appreciate the education and your thoughtfulness and your responses to the Chair, first in your presentation to the Chair's questions and to Councilor Flynn's. So I don't have any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor O'Malley.
Similarly, Mr. Chairman, thank you, gentlemen, for your great work. I have no questions at this time.
Great. And I'm done with my question. I would just say one last thing is it safe to assume that since they provide payroll services and the city of Boston's payroll is, what, 70% of the whole budget?
Right.
So $2 billion go through this payroll process every year. Fair to say?
Correct.
And there's not many banks that can actually provide that kind of service. Is that
Well,
fair to say?
I would say
Or level?
that's fair. When we flow that much money through a particular account, that's a lot of exposure for a bank as well.
Right.
You know, it may be that, you know, when we wire money at the end of the week, if it's a big payroll week, we may be wiring $80 million through an account, and then it immediately comes out, and they're responsible for, you know, kind of distributing that in accordance with the larger files that we send them, telling them exactly where all that money should go. So it takes a bit of a lift to have an operation like that. So I would say that's an accurate statement.
Right. Great.
As a matter of fact, and if you'll notice with some of the respondents, most of the respondents that we really had that wanted that business are the larger banks.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Thanks for your work, Rich. Thanks for your service as well. We will adjourn this hearing regarding docket 0804 and report it out on Wednesday. This hearing's adjourned.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.